Hello, my name is Chuck Wolf. Over the years, I've worked in many different roles, including leading my own leadership consulting company since 1994. I've worked for and with some of the best companies and universities in the world, and have had the opportunity to work with government officials, military organizations, and public and private schools. I'm a leading expert and pioneer in emotional intelligence. Since 2009, I have been a volunteer hosting a radio show I created called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I really enjoy making a difference in people's lives. The show is on award-winning community radio station, WPKN in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In recent years, Simsbury Community Television has been sharing my shows on their station and on YouTube. My sincere hope is that everyone who watches regularly will learn how to use the Emotion Roadmap in their own lives by listening to people who call in to get help with challenges at work, home, and in communities. To learn more, go to www.emotionroadmap.com. If you have a comment or question, email me at cjwolf@cjwolf.com. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. It's nice to be with you here today, right after the July 4th holiday. Happy birthday to America. I hope you're able to have a nice weekend, a nice holiday weekend. Unfortunately, there were places around the country that didn't, and there was some really troubling events that took place over the weekend, as I'm sure most of you already know. But I do want to just mention that at least one of the things that's happened in the past month is that we did pass some bipartisan gun laws, and that's really a good thing to be able to say. It was a long time coming. But I do want to acknowledge that all the hard work that lots of people put into that effort. One of the groups that worked really hard to make that happen was the group called Sandy Hook Promise. And many of the listeners to this show, The Emotion Roadmap, know that I've had guests on from Sandy Hook from time to time. And next week, in honor of the passing of the gun law legislation, and also just to remind people about how important social and emotional learning is, to help with mental health, because mental health is such a part of the puzzle of these horrific events that have happened in schools, in malls, in that parade, and in Highland Park in Illinois. I mean, there's just so many things that have happened that are horrific. And I think, again, in this case, it looks like it ties to mental health. And it's curious. I know, as somebody who's been a psychologist, a family therapist, a school counselor, a life coach, an executive coach, someone who's done a lot of those kinds of work experiences. Mental health is challenging on so many fronts. We haven't made the kind of progress with mental health as we have with some other areas having to do with physical health. But some physical health issues elude our ability to solve those as well. But mental health, I know that in some cases we've done some remarkable things for people, but so many people still struggle and still have such difficult times. That's why I spent time on the year, this is my 13th year now, doing this show, The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. If you look at mental health as sometimes I do it like a seesaw. It's like sometimes we're up when our health is really good. A lot of times we're kind of level, where we have some things in our life that are complicating and challenging us in our life, some issues that are just really unsolved at the time, causing great deals of uncertainty. In my own life, I had some health issues this past year that are behind me now, but for a time they were really concerning. And so you struggle. So if you look at it, sort of mental health as a seesaw, some people are down a lot. The seesaw is more towards the ground where their mental health is really in disarray. How do we get them back up to at least level? And then even better than that, so that most of the time we're feeling healthy. There's lots of ways we do that, but one of the ways we do that is social and emotional learning in schools. And there's been some pushback against social and emotional learning in recent times. because people see it as tied somehow to critical race theory, to the conversations about sexuality and with young children, and they're kind of getting that mixed up. Now, I'm not going to criticize or advocate for either of those two things, critical race theory or teaching of sexual functioning and gender, et cetera, in early grades. I'm not going to argue for or against that. I think that needs to be looked at and considered, and I think local schools and people that with their children in the schools and the teachers and their administrators and the school boards, everybody needs to look at this stuff and decide what makes sense. What makes sense. But I will say that one of the things that helps us make sense with all of those things, as well as many other things that challenge us, is social emotional learning, about finding ways to deal better with our own emotional stuff. What's going on inside of us, what emotionally we're experiencing. I think it's important that we have ways that we can learn how to be smarter and use this science of emotional intelligence to make our lives better. Not just for ourselves, but to be able to influence the lives of those we care about, those we love, and those we work with and interact with in our communities. So many places benefit from all of us learning about and being better at managing our own emotional relationships and our own ability to manage emotions internally, inside ourselves. So I hope this show is about, for you, helping you to generate some inner peace. I hope at times to make this show uplifting, spiritual, if you will, in a way that just makes people feel special. So I hope that those of you who are listening today feel special at the end of the show and special when you first tune in as well. But what I wanted to say is I will be gone next week, but I'm going to, and that's, for those of you who don't know, I'm Chuck Wolf. I'm on the air doing the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, twice a month, the first and second Wednesdays of each month from 12 noon to 1 p.m. From 12 noon to 1 p.m., the first and second Wednesdays of each month. But next Wednesday, which is the second Wednesday of the month, I'm going to be away. So I just wanted you to know the show I want to play for you next week is one that I did not too long ago with a parent of one of the children who died in the Sandy Hook horrific shooting event. And also it has some other guests that also talk about Sandy Hook, not just Sandy Hook Foundation and Sandy Hook Promise and what they're doing to help with social and emotional learning, but also how they're fighting for effective gun laws. So in ways to celebrate the legislation that was passed with bipartisanship, which is really a big plus in today's world that we get something through that's bipartisan. I thought the Sandy Hook show would be a really good one to play. So I'm going to play that next week for you. But this week, what I wanted to talk about is something that I got to do this past week, actually, in Richmond, Virginia, for a company called Dominion Energy. And I had mentioned I was going to do it, and I've been working on it for quite some time. You know, lots of times if I get asked to speak, I may have something I've done before, and I'm just, tweak it a little bit and do it again for this audience. But I always try to keep in mind, who is the audience I'm talking to? And do they have some unique needs that perhaps my talk can help with? So as a keynote speaker, I talk about motivation. I talk about how we get along with one another, about relationships. I talk about certain specific issues like women in the workplace, as leaders in the workplace. I talk a lot about leadership and the ways that emotional intelligence particularly contributes to leadership these days. But one of the things that I got asked to do in Richmond, Virginia for Dominion Energy was to talk about how the Emotion Roadmap might help with an initiative they have. And their initiative is called Diverse Ability. D-I-V-E-R-S-E, Diverse Ability, A-B-I-L-I-T-Y. 2 words put together. And their group is called Diverse Ability. Now, what it's about is that, I guess, first of all of you are probably at least somewhat aware, if not very aware, of all the staffing shortages that are out there. You're impacted by them, whether you think about them as staffing shortages or not. Like, for instance, if you're
luggage doesn't get transferred from one plane to the next on time, and you end up arriving wherever it is you're going, and your luggage isn't there to greet you. Why did that happen? Well, it might have happened because there are less people involved in airlines who are moving luggage these days. Your plane might be delayed because it doesn't get off on time, in part because there are fewer air traffic controllers. You might not get something delivered to your house in a timely basis because materials aren't there, because people aren't in place to make those materials, or there aren't drivers to drive those materials to your home. So staffing shortages may not be something you think about often, but it has impacted all our lives in different ways. Well, Dominion Energy, like lots of companies, is feeling, that there are some problems associated with not having enough staff. Somehow, somebody had the idea. I don't know the actual origin of the idea, but they said, there's a whole population of people with some mental and physical disabilities who are actually quite capable of doing certain jobs, but maybe not full time, maybe not 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Maybe they can come in for a couple days a week. Maybe they can come in for 6 hours instead of 7 or 8 or 9 hours. Maybe there's ways that we can accommodate this other population and have them provide a service. This isn't about charity. This is about adding value to our company and at the same time adding value to their lives. Now, what it takes is a series of accommodations, and challenging accommodations, by the way, not always easy. The obvious ones are like ramps for people in wheelchairs, as an example. But again, there's lots of different things that are involved with people having very different needs. And the other is that you have to have flexible work policies. And some people who don't have that same flexibility, who don't have a certain disability, might feel like that's unfair. So you're challenged on a number of fronts to make it work, but they're working at it. Now, some of them I found out, some of the people on the committee have adult children that are in these categories. And so it's very personal for them. But all of them, even without that condition, even without having, a dependent that's in that role, just want to do something magnificent for the planet. This is so good for companies, so good for people. Think about having a population that is so thankful to you for finding a way to help them to make a contribution, a purposeful contribution in the workplace, who never really want to leave you because they're so thankful that you work so hard to make it work for them, that they want to work and be loyal to you. That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Now, nothing easy about this, by the way. So I was, we're surrounded by a lot of news. Those of you who pay attention to the news a lot know that lots of times we're hearing very negative things. And so there's a lot of things out there that are things that if you listen long enough and often enough will somehow have some impact on your feelings of joy in life and your feelings of depression or sadness or anger in life. And the news often contributes to the more negative emotions because I guess we're attracted to news that is more about what's happening that's negative than we are about sort of really neat things that happen in the workplace. So I view my show as occasionally trying to bring forth something that's uplifting. And this to me was very uplifting. As I was sitting in the audience waiting to speak to several hundred people who were either present in the room or online across different states, across the country, to the speech I was about to give, I was so struck by the leaders of this group and what they talked about and the passion they talked about it. And it filled me up with joy. I mean, actually, often when I'm about to give a speech, I'm sort of, I don't want to say tense, but I'm focused. And focused and tense are not that different, but focused has a more positive ring to it, I think. And that's why I'm usually very focused on what I want to say and being prepared and doing the things I know that make an audience respond well. Now, part of that, of course, is all the preparation that goes into what you're going to present. But it also has to do with how you actually present it that day, what you actually do to make it work. So here I am sitting in the room getting all set to present the Emotion Roadmap, brought to you live and in person with Chuck Wolf, and how it relates to diversibility and also to a bunch of other things I'll mention to you in a minute. But
I was sitting, waiting, and I was having the introductions to the program, to the group, to the status of ongoing initiatives that they had. And I started to glow. I just emotionally, I felt myself just being lifted up out of my chair, because what a wonderful initiative I thought to be part of. And I hope whatever I say, whatever I might do, I help make this better. What a neat thing to be working on. So I hope that message resonates with you and brings you up a bit too. And also, perhaps those of you in position to hire people might think a bit about it yourself. If you're in a small business, it might be a little less complicated to bring 1 or 2 people in, or 3 or 4 people in that might be from these populations. You just want to think hard about what that means and how you might do it. I think it's a wonderful idea to do. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about what that talk was about, because I was really pleased with how it came out. As you may know, that group is seen often as sort of the others, not the same as the rest of us somehow. But one of the things that I saw years ago, and you can see this on YouTube, is a video. It's a short video called "The Tale," T-A-L-E, of O. Now, O represents other. And I asked this, I think, the last time I was on the air, because I know I was going to be doing that talk. I said, have any of you willing to share a time when you were the other? And what I mean by the other is somehow there was a majority group of people in a room at some point, or at a place, or in a club, or somewhere, someplace, where you felt like there's a whole bunch of people here that look and act and think and believe a lot different than me. I'm sort of the odd man out, or the odd woman out, or the odd person out. I'm different here somehow. I feel like the letter O, while everybody else looks to me like the letter X. So there's this little video called "The Tale of O" that's out there that you can see, that is dated. It was done in, I think, 1980s, maybe 70s even. But anyway, when I first saw it, I thought, this is like so limited in terms of the resources it took to put this together, but it is so incredibly clever about the possibilities and the actual experiences of what happens to O's. Well, one of the things that happens to O's is you get to represent all other O's, because any question about O's comes to you, right? How do people like you feel about that? What do you celebrate when you celebrate this holiday? What do you believe about this? I mean, what do most of you believe about this? As if you are all these other people somehow, right? So being the letter O in this video is really kind of cool. So I encourage you to look at it, because it's really thought-provoking, even though it's somewhat dated, I'd have to say, but still worth seeing, I think. So anyway, that was sort of a recommendation that I gave to the group as well. Well, I've been talking a lot about what I was doing and some things that I wanted you to know about, but I also dedicate this show to helping people with challenges they face. So for those of you new to the show, I'll tell you about it in a second. For those of you who are tuning in because you like listening and you're a regular listener, thanks so much for tuning in and being here as often as you are. I really appreciate that. For those of you who don't know much about the show, again, it's called The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. My name's Chuck Wolf. I'm an expert in this area of emotional intelligence. I've been a pioneer and developed expertise back in the late 1990s. I've been doing this a long time. And I have found some tools, a process, a template, if you will, to guide how people, you, as well as others, deal with your own emotions and how you influence your relationships and the emotions of others in your experience. How do you do that? I've learned something that I've developed and used called the Emotion Roadmap that I teach others. And that emotion roadmap basically works like this. If you've got an issue that's you're facing right now in your life and you're uncertain how to deal with it, and you're uncomfortable even thinking or talking about it because it's making you so anxious, or there's just a high level of uncertainty associated with it, and you're a smart person and you're usually good at solving problems and you're a pretty good critical thinker normally, but somehow at this point you're stuck. In my experience, that almost always has something to do with emotions, either inside yourself, something emotionally going on inside of you, or you're worried about what emotions you're going to create when you deal with this with somebody else that's important to you somehow. So if something is resonating with you that you're uncertain about, I ask you the following kinds of questions. I ask you, tell me a little bit about it. Don't read me the whole book, but give me sort of the executive summary. Tell me in a few minutes what's going on for you and what you'd like to see happen in the best case scenario. So I ask, okay, now tell me who's key. Obviously you're involved. You're always involved if this is happening to you, but it may be more than you. It may be you're dealing with somebody else. Sometimes it's just internal to you, but lots of times it has to do with somebody else. If only I could change how they felt about this situation. If only I could get them to agree with what I want to do. You may be having thoughts like that. So in any case, I want you to think about who else is key to what you're trying to get done. And what are you feeling about this? And what is he or she or they feeling about it? Then I ask you, okay, if what you're feeling is helpful, fine. If what they're feeling is helpful, fine. If what they are feeling is helpful, fine. But usually it's not. This is where I find that usually you're not feeling great about this. That's why you're calling. You're kind of upset about it, actually. And maybe they are too, or you worry that they will be if it's something you haven't brought up that you need to bring up with them. So once we discover that some of the feelings that are in play aren't helpful, I ask you a second question, which is, what would be ideal to feel for you and for anybody that's key? What would be the ideal feelings? And then 3, how do we get from what you are feeling and what they are feeling to what would be ideal for all of you to feel? How do we do that? What are some strategies that might work? And then I help you talk through those strategies. And then I ask you sounds like we got a strategy that may work. Are you willing to do that, what we just talked about? And also, are you able to do it? Willing is one thing. You might be willing, but you may not have the capability at the time. If it involves money or energy, you may be lacking in those. So you may not be able, even if you're willing. But also, you might be able to do it, but sometimes, strange as it sounds, you're unwilling. And there are times when that happens too. So that's how it works. So those of you that are regulars that want to call in, let me give you the number. So in case you want to call, you can call me right now. It's 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. I'll give anybody a chance to call that just wants my help with this, because one of the things that I like to do on the show is if I'm able to help somebody, I help that person, whoever that person might be. And maybe it's you. Maybe it's you. You're sitting there thinking, should I call? I don't know this person, but I got something I'm stuck with. I got something at work or at home or in my community, in my neighborhood, or at a club I belong to, or at a particular group I belong to that isn't working the way I want it to. And I wonder if this person can be helpful to me. Well, if you call and I talk with you, I kind of walk you through and explain what I'm doing as I'm helping you so that everybody learns. That's what I try to do with the show. So 203-336-9756. That's the number for the show. And I'll give it a minute. One more time if you didn't get the number and you want to call. 203-336-9756. Okay. So I don't have anybody just waiting breathlessly to call me. Okay, that's good, I guess. Although it's always nice to take a call because that helps to change up the dialogue a bit. And it's kind of more interesting at times for me, obviously, if I got somebody that I'm interacting with and not just telling you what I know, because I'm learning from you too when you're sharing with me. I do get to learn. So if you haven't got something that's challenging you that you want to talk to me about, I would appreciate your calling in with what you think about the idea of trying to hire people who are disabled in some way. Trying to hire people that are disabled in some way. Do you think that's a good idea? Do you see it happening someplace that you can share with us that it is ongoing and actually happening? It'd be kind of nice to hear about any experiences like that, or just what your thoughts are about it. Again, 203-336-9756. This is Chuck Wolf. You're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. 203-336-9756. Okay, at this point, not having any callers, I will share with you some of what took place at the event where I prepared this speech, just to kind of talk with you and walk you through my thoughts about how the emotion roadmap relates to the other. Now, when I say the other, when you think about the other, what comes to mind for you? Who do you think of as the other? Who is the other in your mind? Well, as it turns out, there's lots of categories out there where lots of people are feeling like the other at different points in time. So who might that be? Well, there's indigenous people. There's people of color. There's the Lgbtqia community. There's caregivers, people that have to take care of their parents or children or anyone, maybe a partner who's had a stroke or just got dementia or is just aging and having experiences where they're falling or just losing some of their abilities. So there's caregivers. Anyway, there's lots of these different groups out there. There's the whole idea of diversity. And what is inclusion about? What do we mean when we say we want to be inclusive? Of everyone? Really? Of all those different groups? Are you good with that? What does it mean to be inclusive? And also, what does it mean when we say accessibility or ability? How do we get those people who are also seen as others? That's the point. I mean, right now, you might have women often see themselves as others in certain circumstances. White men at this point beginning to feel themselves as others in certain situations and conversations. So it really is kind of like the focus is on how we're different that creates others. The idea of inclusive is how are we the same? You know, sometimes people say we all bleed red, you know, whatever our color is. Well, one of the things that I know where we're all the same is around feelings. Now, that's not to say that what makes you angry makes me angry, but it is to say that you get angry and I get angry. We both have experienced anger. Same thing about depression or sadness. What makes you sad and depressed may or may not make me sad or depressed. Something else might make me sad and depressed that doesn't really impact you hardly at all. And yet we both, or not just we both, but all of us, all of you listening, at some point have been sad. Maybe you're sad now. Maybe you're depressed now. So we all share feelings one way or another. But let me give you a chance to call again. So again, I'd like you to see if there's anybody out there that might need some helping with the situation that you're facing that might have something to do with someone that you're in your family. It could be a sibling, could be a son, a daughter, a parent, a cousin, could be a friend, could be somebody that's a neighbor, something that you're struggling with emotionally that you'd like some help with. The number is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. By the way, I'm also hoping again to have, as I mentioned, next week I'm going to put on a show that I've played before that has someone associated with the station, Doug Lloyd, and we have one of the parents of someone who was involved with the Sandy Hook situation, someone who worked with the foundation and the Promise organization. So that's going to be in part to celebrate the new bipartisan gun laws that got passed last month, and also to just emphasize the importance of social and emotional learning. But anyway, if you'd like to call and talk a bit about something going on in your life, the number is 203-336-9756. The other topic I've been sharing with you this morning is about this idea of people going to work that have limited abilities but do have abilities and would like to work. Now, I don't know that they can do the most important functions for your organization, but if you view all functions as important, that everything from taking out the garbage to strategic initiatives and product development as being really, really purposeful, meaningful, and helpful to your organization. If you can view life that way, then everybody lends a hand and everybody feels respected and feels like they're providing a meaningful, purposeful outcome with the work that they do. So that's a big deal. If you've got any thoughts about employing people with any kind of disabilities and you know about some places that do that and what's going on, again, I'd appreciate hearing from you. 203-336-9756. I know in certain retail venues like Walmart or Stop and Shop or places like that, that I know there have been people that have been doing certain kinds of things, and they've been willing to take a shot at hiring people with different kinds of abilities and some disabilities. So if you know of any of those kind of experiences you'd like to share them, again, give me a call. Okay, so at this point, one more time on the number, 203-336-9756. And now I'll just tell you about the presentation. I felt really proud of the presentation. I worked hard on pulling it together. So what I thought about was that there's a lot of experiences I've had in recent years that have led me to understand that, first of all, if I'm talking to a particular group, let's say somebody in the Lgbtqia community, I can't assume that because I'm talking to a member of that group that this person feels the same way as the last person from that group I talked to. When I'm talking to a person of color, I can't assume that because I've talked to other people of color and I know what they think, that I know what this person thinks. I think we make a mistake when we assume we know a group. We may know some issues that a group advocates for. We may have got some things that are pretty common that most people consider reasonable thoughts, policies, even initiatives. But we can't assume that we know what any individual thinks because they're in a group, and therefore we know what people in that group think. I've heard people say that they think they know that. I think that's a mistake. The other thing that I think is really important to understand about people who are in other groups than whatever we consider our own group is this idea that we all at times are the other, just like we're all at times are depressed, or we all at times are angry, or all at times are happy, or we're all at times are joyful, or we're all at times excited. I mean, we all have certain things in common, even though we might look different, believe different about certain things, have a different religion or a different color, etc. All those things are possible, and yet we all have certain things in common too. And one of the things that I like to think about is, how do we have more people who want to understand me and who want to understand you? Not your whole group necessarily, but you. In other words, one of the things I presented in this workshop was kind of interesting, actually. There was Lgbtqia glossary of terms for those people that wanted to know the vocabulary associated with people who were members of that group. There was a bunch of terms. Now, actually, I counted them all, and there were, I believe, 118 different terms. Now, nobody in that group and nobody outside that group is ever probably going to know all those terms. But you know what? If you're somebody that's in my life that I care about and you fit one of those terms, I'm going to learn that term about you. I'm going to try to understand that definition and what it means for you. Because I care about you, right? So I don't necessarily need to understand all of these other terms. But you know, if you're talking to me and you're talking in the jargon that groups talk in sometimes, Like certain groups have their own kind of, I don't know what you call it, but sort of tribalistic language terms that they use that really kind of identify within their own group that are pretty common and often used when they're with one another. But if I'm outside your group and I'm just trying to understand your group, if you get mad at me because I don't understand all your language and your terms, that pushes me away. Now, I'm not going to let you push me away easily if I care about you, because I'm going to care about you. But over time, if you keep making me wrong as I'm trying to learn, but I'm not grasping it quickly or quick enough for you, you lose the chance for you and I to have a good relationship, I think. So I think two things. We want to be forgiving of each other and also forgiving of ourselves for not knowing everything there is to know about how to get along with somebody who might be somewhat different than me. So there's a huge push for all these different groups to have their identities understood and valued and respected. And I get that, and I want to do that. And I'm doing a pretty good job, I think, most of the time, but I don't always get it right. And if I get it wrong, but I'm trying, I forgive myself. I'm not happy with myself, but I do forgive myself. Does that make sense to you? So I think there's a big piece of this puzzle of how we all get along better, how we all are brothers going hand in hand and sisters going hand in hand, brothers and sisters going hand in hand. How do we do more of that? By forgiving each other and forgiving ourselves and trying our best to be the best possible versions of us. And I love that idea of trying to be the best possible version of me. And I am not always the best possible version. I can be grumpy at times. I can be selfish at times. I can be demanding at times. I can be critical at times. I know that's all inside of me. That's possible. But you know, more and more these days, I catch myself when I'm about to do something that fits one of those negative categories. That is part of my repertoire. It's part of my behavior. It's part of what I know I've done over my lifetime. But I want, as often as I possibly can, to be the best possible version of me. And I hope you do too, want to be the best possible version of you. And what does that even mean? What does that even mean? Have you thought about what's the best version of you? So if you want to feel uplifted today, when you're done listening to this show, or even now as you're listening, start thinking about what is the best possible version of me? And darn, I'm going to try and be that best version of me the rest of today. And if I like what happens today, I'm going to try it tomorrow too. And I might even make a week of it until I start to feel like, you know what, every day I get up in the morning and I know I'm not feeling great today. I didn't sleep so well. I got challenges in front of me. I've got some things where people were critical of something I did, or I don't like what my son or daughter-in-law or my grandson or some choices somebody's making. I'm not happy about that. And I want to say something. I'm not sure how to say it. And how do you be the best possible version of you? And do all the things you need to do, but do them in a way that people feel respected and valued. So that's a piece of what I talked about the other day. One of the other things I talked about, but again, I'll give you a chance to call first, 203-336-9756. At this point, call about anything you want to talk about that I'm talking about if you like. 203-336-9756. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about this idea of empathy. Empathy, as people like to say, is trending these days. And what does that mean? Well, it means that lots of people are talking about it. You Google empathy, or you put empathy into DuckDuckGo or Bing or whatever search engine you're using, and all of a sudden you get all kinds of things popping up. Now, what does it mean to be empathic or empathetic to people? I mean, we think we know, right? We say what we've learned to say, which is, it means walking in somebody else's shoes or walking in somebody else's moccasins. That was a popular ad some time ago with a Native American kind of walking, can you walk in my moccasins kind of thing. But what does that really mean? I've got a caller. Okay. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who's calling, please?
Hi, Chuck. This is Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, so I've got a thing that I'm troubled with. So I have a brother who is he's conservative and I'm progressive, and we've come to an agreement that we just don't talk about politics because we believe our relationship is more important.
Excuse me one second, Paul. I just want to say I've got another caller, and I can't take a phone call when I'm talking to somebody. So if you don't mind, call back. I just want to let the other people know that. Okay, Paul. So that's not uncommon, as you might imagine, right?
Yeah. So, a couple months ago, his wife called me up about an issue, and I disagreed with her. It had to do with climate change and such. And
just a second, Paul. That's a little unusual, isn't it? That your cousin's wife would call you about climate change? Is that?
It was my brother-in-law's wife. Yeah. So it was my sister-in-law.
Is that?
Did I say my cousin?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'm just kind of struck by the fact that this would be that she would call you to talk to you about climate change. Well, is that normal for you and her?
No, it's very unusual.
Okay.
When we're gathered there, like at a holiday or such, there was a discussion and it didn't go well, so I just excused myself and but that happened, a couple of years ago, so things were going well up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so my brother's birthday came around in May, and I texted him, and I sent him a card, texted, called him. I got no response. And then my birthday was in June. I got a real, just a political, patriotic birthday card and very simple, happy birthday kind of thing. So I've been, thinking about, so what's my next step to reach out other than drive to his house and say what's going on, So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is you can try to avoid the conversation. I know that you've already gone down that route, but at times it pops up and you end up talking about it. And now the question is, how do you repair the damage, right? It's not so much about how do you handle that because you've decided you don't really want to engage in that. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. And so now it's more a question about how do I get back and have a relationship with my brother and that I want, that I value, that I care about, and we just move past this other stuff somehow. That's what you're asking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on.
Okay. So right now you're in the place where it sounds like you feel you want to move past this. You want to, you don't want to think about that you have differences here. We recognize that he has some things he thinks about, but that doesn't matter because he's your brother and you want to feel like he's your brother and that you love him, and that's good. And that we're going to have disagreements, and this is just one of many that we might have over the years. But that doesn't mean that we don't love each other and care about each other and show that. That's where I think you're. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And so for him, he's feeling like you've upset him, maybe his wife too, because the two of them, are they on the same side?
Yeah. But the thing is, Chuck, is it was just a conversation with his wife, and so I didn't talk to him at all about this issue, and we kind of had an understanding we wouldn't talk about this because there was a blow up. I don't know, five years ago or even further, and after that, we just avoided that.
So it sounds like he may have heard from her, and that made it worse for him somehow.
I'm sure it did. Yeah.
And that's why she initiated the call. Okay, so that's why all that was happening. So I guess the first thing I like to ask people who are kind of stuck, which is where you are at the moment, is what have you already tried and it didn't work? So I know not to suggest that. And what are you thinking about doing?
Well, what I tried was, I sent a birthday card and I called him, left a message, and it was, uplifting, told him I loved him. And then I followed it up with a text, again, uplifting, hey, I'd like to hear from you. And then, so the next thing is I was going to get a birthday card, and change it to, instead of a happy Mother's Day, happy Brother's Day. And, just say that, I value, my brotherhood relationship with him, and I don't want to lose him.
So why do you think that didn't work?
Why didn't the phone call and text?
Yeah, well, actually, that's the next thing you want to do. But yeah, but why? So far, what you've tried seems very reasonable. I think a lot of people would want to do something similar, and yet it didn't work. Why do you think that is?
No, boy, you're asking me to get inside the head of my brother.
Well, it's the best way. It's the best case scenario for trying to understand what needs to happen to make it work. Is to try and to at least anticipate what's going on. Yeah.
Well, I know he's very passionate. So I think our family of origin, we had, there's some alcoholism related issues. Now I've worked on that, and I don't know if he has. And so in the program, you work your program and to overcome stuff like that. And I don't know if I don't know what he's done regarding that. So
that's a possibility.
And I think
that could color this a bit. Yeah.
I think he might be stuck in that. So,
well, that's a tougher one. But here's another possibility anyway to think about. Can I ask what happened when you had when was the phone call with sister-in-law, and what happened during that call?
All right, so it was before May, so I'm going to say April.
Oh, it's a while ago. Okay, yeah,
yeah.
And what happened with the phone call?
Well, so she had called me up and she was discussing about windmill blades and things like that, and they fall apart, and then how do you recycle them, and so I had it, and we're both civil engineers, and so I was a little surprised because when the whole, I don't want to start this huge thing with climate change, but it's given the alternatives of fossil fuels and going towards alternative energies, renewable energies. There's going to be some process to make that work. And, and I told her, that I have grandchildren and I'm worried about their futures. So, and she just kept pushing the issue. And I told her I'm getting upset over this issue. And I said, I don't want to discuss it anymore. So that was pretty much the end of the conversation.
So one of the things that might be holding your brother up, and this is what occurred to me, one of the things that I was saying, Paul, earlier is in this process I look at who's key. So you're trying to work with your brother to reestablish the brotherly love you feel for him, and you're hoping that he returns that. And he's caught between a rock and a hard place because his wife, on the other hand, is feeling like disrespected by you. You won't even talk to her about this thing where you both have something in common, and she's making the case that The conservative case is that it's insane to assume that wind energy, solar energy is going to replace what the world needs anytime soon, and then we have to do more with, so whatever that argument is. So,
sure.
And so you said, I don't want to talk about it anymore, and you shut it off. And somehow that lingered with her, I'm guessing, because she's key to this too. And I think that perhaps, unless you clean this up with her, your brother can't move forward.
Interesting.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
So if you think of her as one of the key people in this whole process here, and I always think it's really, because sometimes it's subtle, because it just sounds like it's just you and your brother. And yet when I asked you why it might not work, I'm thinking because she's not letting it work.
Yeah.
Because she's pissed about you not understanding the need for more fossil fuel. And I mean, I get again, I try not to be judgmental on this show. So I understand the climate change and the caring about grandkids. I also think it's kind of insane to go to Venezuela and Saudi Arabia, where it's much less clean the way oil's produced than what it's done over here. So I think there's a craziness out there that we stop listening and trying to look for common ground sometimes by these putting stakes in the ground and not really talking through about, okay, so I can see why you feel that way. Yeah, okay, it's not exactly how I feel, but okay, that if all you needed to say was that makes sense at some level to me, I think, and you might, but you can't necessarily go backwards, and I don't even know if you'd want to do that. That's where you might not be willing. That's one of the things where you're certainly able, but you might not be willing to say that. Yeah.
Well, here's, going back to that couple of years ago, the family, there are a few of us that stayed around after dinner to have a discussion, and it got a little political. And what I've found is that I'm willing to be open to ideas, because both sides have good points to make about how society should be run. And I would agree with the points that they were making if I felt that they were valid. But never did they agree to any of my points. So it gets a point where, I don't feel.
Paul, are you still there? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
You discuss your.
Oh, I just lost the connection, so I didn't hear what you said. But you don't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you don't feel what?
So the point I'm making is that I will discuss anything with anybody as long as they're willing to consider my points of view as.
Okay, so your connection is getting bad. Can you hear me, Paul?
But I don't feel.
Paul, let me. I'm going to run out of time, so let me kind of sum up where we are, because you're breaking up. So let me put it. Let me kind of say what I think needs to happen, and you have a choice to make. So if you want to have your relationship with your brother be about being brothers, and you're unwilling to compromise your views about politics or the planet or fossil fuels or whatever it might be, without them respecting your viewpoint, and you allowing them just to say, just saying, hey, I'm okay, I understand your argument, and then just finishing the discussion that way without having the need for them to respect your point of view too, because that sounds really important to you, and I get it. I understand why that's important to you. But I'd say to you, you have a choice to make. If you want to maintain that stance that you won't give without them respecting your viewpoint, then you're not going to get the change you want. If you want to let go of your viewpoint, because whether his wife or he believes what you believe around fossil fuels or anything else makes very little difference to the planet in general. It really is. It's important to you as an individual, but it's not important in the scheme of things.
what is important in the scheme of things, in my mind at least, is that you love each other and you get past this moment. So that means you've given some stuff up and you're not getting anything back, except what you are getting back, maybe, if you're lucky, is your brother's, your brother in your life and the love that you feel for him.
Okay.
Something to think about, huh?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, good luck with it. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Okay. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Chuck. All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye. By the way, I've just got the minute left, and I just want to say that, what Paul's struggling with is so common among so many people. And honestly, I had to get to that point myself with my own family members at times. The kinds of things that we might argue about that are just, I mean, they're meaningful to us because we have a belief and a strong belief about the things that are important to us. And yet at the same time, what's most important and how do you make that happen? Okay, so I hope that inspires all of you to let go of some things that really don't matter that much in truth. But what does matter is the love of family. I'm Chuck Wolf. You've been listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Thanks for listening, everybody. And next week, there'll be a show on about Sandy Hook. Take care. Bye-bye.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.